Great news for Ukraine and the free world. Russia failed with its attempt to get more ground in the Kursk region. For almost 1 week they're attacking the Ukrainian positions. Somehow Ukraine was capable to stop all of that. Russia produced modern equipment like BTR-82A, which they used massively during the latest strikes. And also Russians used some of the tanks, like for example this one, which was stopped in the Kursk region. This is the T-80 tank, but the main accent Russians put on light armored vehicles, or the vehicles which do not have any sort of the armor, like for example Ural trucks. Yes, Russia also attacks with the trucks. So this is the tank and this is BMP-2 probably. Russia is running out of the armored vehicles in the Kursk direction. That's why for the latest attack, which happened a couple of hours before I started to film this video, Russia used even China Golf carts. Well, there are some of the light vehicles shown on some of the combat videos, but I cannot show you that stuff on YouTube because Russians are just following their usual space program, flying around. YouTube is not okay with that special space operation, which usually happens after the vehicle is ambushed by Ukrainian army. So all of that stuff I usually publish on my Telegram channel, which you may find in the video description just below. And yes, by the way, hello my friends and welcome. My name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's go. As for the Russian convoys, I have some of the videos. I may show you the screenshots that the Russian vehicles were annihilated. This is the Russian BTR probably, and here in the front there was the tank. So for the last few of the days, Russia lost at least 30 of the BTR-82A vehicles, Akhmat vehicles as well. By the way, those are equipped now with some of the turret. It is the Russian analog of MRAP, but those vehicles are bigger, clumsier and heavier. Plus Russia lost many of the tanks, lots of the supply vehicles which are not included in this list, and as I've told you today, they've started to use even the China-made cars and lots of the Ural trucks. Well, the number of the BTRs Russia used is really impressive. Those are the modern vehicles, but Russia used them in the worst way possible, mostly sending them in a long convoys just through the minefields. And the outcome is well known. All of those BTRs and armored vehicles are just gone, and Russia is looking for other solution. They really now struggle with the armored vehicles, and because of that their main offensive for now failed in the Kursk region. Honestly, I'm quite impressed with the Ukrainian army defense because no robust defense lines were built, but with the help of the minefields and using lots of the FPV drones, Ukraine was capable to stop the Russian offensive. Again, my friends, it's for now because Russia still may accumulate forces for one more big strike. Well, they already accumulated those, but they waste those without any thoughts. Yes, my opinion was for Ukrainian army to withdraw from the area. Again, I'm not the military expert, I'm not the Ukrainian general, so they know better. I thought like that at first because Ukraine lost many of the territories, and also this assault, well, let's say honestly, it failed. There was the attempt of Ukrainian army to encircle the Russian forces here, and also we know that Russians are quite active in Ukrainian front lines, so there Ukraine is losing the territories. But nevertheless, I'm quite impressed with current Ukrainian defense of the Kursk region. At the same time, I still think that Ukraine should withdraw the forces from Kursk. And it is not because of the previous reasons I just mentioned, no. The main thing that Ukraine is unable to advance in the Kursk region, to cut Russian supplies, to go to nuclear power station. So there should be the perspective of any sort of the operation. If Ukraine just holds the ground, after all, Russia may accumulate enough forces, and it will accumulate enough forces to push Ukraine out with the losses, yes, but they will also cause the losses for Ukrainian side too. And today we also have the update from the Ukrainian front lines, but I'm gonna speak about that stuff a little later because I usually start my videos from the positive news, so for now let's continue to speak about those. Guys, if you like the job that I do on YouTube, you may also consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link for my Patreon page right in the video description below. Thank you so much for supporting my motivation. And again, guys, the vehicles which Ukrainian army is using are much better compared to the Russian-made. Yeah, Ukrainian army also has the Soviet-made vehicles, but the Western-made are just superb. I'm telling you about it all the time. That's the best thing actually Ukraine obtains from the West. A good quality weaponry, like for example the Strikers, Bradleys, tanks, wherever. Ukraine destroys the Russian army vehicles not just in the Kursk region but elsewhere. For example, this is the Kherson Oblast. You may see the Russian Grad rocket artillery system. Actually, there were two of the vehicles which were ambushed by HIMARS. Russians tried to hide those vehicles in this tree line, but the tree line itself was significantly or is is significantly damaged. All of those trees and Russian positions are just shrapnelled. And also the Russian command center was hit again with the help of the HIMARS system. And this massive Russian assault happened somewhere in Siversk direction. There Russia used the armored vehicles and tanks. It is just crazy what Russia is doing with its forces, but yes, they propel on Ukrainian front lines in the east. But after all, I think that they expected to get more ground judging on the resources they use. In Kurakhova direction, Russia tries to advance with the convoys, but usually they also got ambushed. No matter how they go on the roads or on the fields, Russia still produces lots of the weaponry, but they lose a lot. They are unable to cover their losses. But like Ukraine, Russia has some of the allies like North Korea. Who would have thought that that country would provide that huge amount of weaponry to Russia? We're speaking about artillery shells, and Russia also started to receive the artillery systems, self-propelled ones, from their dictator friend Kim Jong-un. The North Korean artillery systems Koksan were spotted in Russia. Those are 170mm. For sure Russia obtained the shells as well for them, and they have a very long range, up to 70 kilometers. Even though the Russian army has lots of the artillery shells, but they have some of the issues with the barrels for their artillery systems. Because those have the limited resource, that's why Russia takes those barrels from the artillery stored somewhere. But even that is not enough, and here North Korea helps Russia again. By the time then we see the uncertainty in the eyes of our Western allies, North Korea continue to help a lot. Obviously now the picture is not good if we speak about the unity of the Western countries. But Ukraine has also some of the artillery systems, like for example those photos were posted online. This is the Dita Checkmate artillery system. 155mm also has the long range. As the sources say, those were delivered not long time ago to Ukrainian army. Plus China is also the close ally of Moscow. They transferred lots of the military equipment, military gear to the Russian army. And the European Union wants to apply some of the sanctions on China because of that. They are sure that there is the government program exists in China which is working to supply those spare parts to Russia. We know that China banned some of the export of their drones intended for the military purposes. Russia continued to receive the spare parts, and that's why European Union wants to apply the sanctions. I'm sure also that some of the countries in EU will be against those sanctions, like for example Hungary, which is the Chinese puppet country. Plus Slovakia, I think, will follow the same narrative. We see how Russia increases the production of their FPV drones, and the spare parts they are also taken from China. Motors, electronics, everything of that is made in China. Maybe the frame is made in Russia. They call it Upyr. Upyr is something between vampire and orc. Indeed, a spicy name for the Russian drone. And they have many of those, so again the Russian army is not that big as it used to be. Also, North Korea received some of the technologies to produce the Lancet-looking drones. Definitely 100% those are the Russian-made Lancets. But Kim Jong-un is probably telling that those are made in North Korea. Well, in the future it could happen. I guess that Russia supplied lots of the technologies to North Korea. So dictators are preparing their military for the possible future wars. Meanwhile, we see some of the drone usage of the American army on their Bradleys. The drone is located over here, could be used for the surveillance missions. M2 Bradley is one of the most modified military vehicles out there, and the United States Army continued to modify it. Bradley is the king of versatility. Ukrainian army also received many of the drones. The China-made components are still over there. But the thing that Ukrainian army mostly obtains the drones from volunteers, unlike the Russian army, which has the massive production of the FPV drones. Yeah, Ukraine also tries to produce the FPV drones, but for now it's just uncomparable with the Russian production. And also yes, because China supplies Russia with the spare parts. Plus, Ukraine again captures lots of the prisoners of war in the Kursk region, and not only. And this is the video of the Russian soldier who celebrates something while he is in the Russian base, in the Russian camp. He drinks vodka directly from the grenade cover. But that's what happened to him after all. He was captured by Ukrainian soldiers, and he will taste some of the Ukrainian food in Ukrainian prison. Sorry, but no more vodka. And just for you to understand the condition for the Russian soldiers that they attack, they openly say that they will not be given any sort of the medical treatment in case they receive some of the wounds during their attacks. It is usually up to them to cover many of the kilometers to the Russian bases back. And this Russian volunteer from Yakutia lost his leg. Moreover, he cut his leg himself. He told his own story in the hospital, saying that he was wounded in the leg, he wasn't able to move to return back, that's why he just stayed at the same position for a very long period of time. Then he saw that his leg began to rot, and that's why he decided to cut it out with the help of the knife. He said that there was no other way, likely he got some of the painkillers with him. So he obtained not just his millions of rubles by going to fight in Ukraine, but also a disability sticker for his future car and a wheelchair. It's like winning the lottery. This commander of the Russian company is fighting somewhere in Pokrov's direction, and he complains about really severe losses. He said that it has never been like that in the Russian army. From his unit there are just 4 of the soldiers left, and they are forced to hide in the remains of the building. It all says that the Russian military command is still incompetent. Yes, Putin tried to jail someone, to remove someone from their positions, and to remove particular generals from their positions, but the system works as before. Russians still use the mid-wave tactics, big long convoys. Yes, they learn on their mistakes, they're now better equipped. The current Russian army is not what it was in 2022, but still they use their big resources in not a good way. If Ukrainian army had at least 50% of what Russian army has now, there would be no more war. Ukraine would just get rid of the Russian army on its own territory. And you know, because of the Ukrainian strikes on the Russian oil refineries, many of the Russian oil facilities stopped the operation during the cold period of the year. Yes, they were not capable to cope with the cold weather, that's why management decided to halt the production. At least 3 of the Russian big oil refineries did it, that's why we expect some of the rise of the fuel prices inside Russia. Alright, let's speak about the case which happened today in Chernihiv Oblast. Actually, Russian army, the small sabotage group, entered Ukrainian territory, they crossed the border and installed their own flag. The deep state explains that there were 2 of the sabotage groups, small ones. They entered the Ukrainian territory, and one of the groups covered almost 2 kilometers. They stopped at the village Muravi, which is empty one. They actually didn't cross the river, they put their flag and then retreated back to the Russian territory. No fighting, nothing happened because Ukraine keeps this territory as the buffer area. Why there are no Ukrainian forces? Because Russians might use some of the artillery and mortars to hit the Ukrainian army. For this reason, this territory is mostly empty, but I would suggest to put some of the mines there. As we know, Ukraine has some of their remote mining tools, like we see in the Kursk region. So why Russia is doing it? They want to create the panic state. For example, in Chernihiv region, they want locals to fear about possible big Russian assault. It is not the first operation of the small Russian sabotage groups in Chernihiv region, no. Before they ambushed some of the vehicles of the Ukrainian patrol. So for sure Ukraine should come out with solution to stop those Russian sabotage attacks, but again Ukraine has limited resources. A German Chancellor Scholz spoke with Putin today. It happened for the first time in 2 years. Well, officially he said that he asked Putin to withdraw the forces from Ukraine, blah blah blah, but we don't know the real topics they were speaking about. Zelensky in his evening address was angry about the case because he thinks that Putin will be legitimized by the West, and Russia should be completely isolated. Here I agree with that, but it's impossible to isolate Russia completely. They continue to trade with the third countries, and by the way, they continue to trade with the European Union and the United States in some certain ways. Russia still obtains some of the spare parts somehow made in the United States and Europe, as well as the Russian oil is being sold to our allies, maybe also via the third countries, or directly as it happens with Hungary and Slovakia. So actually, if we speak about isolation, it is not happening. And the interesting fact that our allies paid Russia more by buying their natural resources than they supported Ukraine from the very beginning of the war. Russia continued to supply their oil and gas through Ukraine. Well, as Ukrainian side says, our Western partners insist for Ukraine to continue those supplies. Meanwhile, Lavrov and Peskov also commented on the conversation between Scholz and Putin. They basically say that Russia will not negotiate. Russia needs all of the territories of Ukraine which they put in their constitution, and the war will continue unless Russia gets those territories. Yeah, as usual, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts. Yeah, somehow Russia assaults towards Kharkiv as well. Well, basically the goal for Russia is to occupy all of the Ukraine. And judging on the comments of the Russian high officials, it seems like they're comfortable under the current conditions. As I've told you many times, allies push the wrong side for communication. They should press Putin for it, not Ukraine. Ukraine is just defending its territories, it has no other choice. Russia wants Ukraine to become Russia, that's it. Some of the good news from the United States of America: Ukraine will start to receive the big military packages under the current White House administration every week. So billions and billions of dollars will be spent for Ukrainian military. All of those funds transferred have been agreed already before, and we are speaking about 9 billion United States dollars, which, as we know, usually go to the United States military sector to pay salaries, buy materials for the shells production, for example, or to modernize the equipment of the United States factories. All of that is the part of the military help for Ukraine. Alright, now let's go to the Ukrainian front line. Russians moved recently in this area. They basically want to expand their bridgehead to continue assault towards Pokrovsk. They always go with at least 2 attack vectors, like we see in this area. One attack goes towards Ulysivka, the other one towards Petrivka, so Ukraine is forced to disperse its forces to many of the directions. And Russia is free to decide where is the weak spot in Ukrainian defense and where they should put their main strike, sending most of the forces. It is happening in a small scale, as we see it over here, and also on a larger scale. If we speak about this big pocket, inside there are lots of the small pockets as well. Experts are really now concerned about this one because there are many of the villages. But here the distance is just around 6 kilometers, roughly 4 miles, which is definitely nothing. But at the same time, Ukraine still keeps lots of the forces here. I always read the Ukrainian army commander who posts the information on his Telegram channel. Well, he says that definitely if Russia takes Uspennivka, it will be a very bad situation for Ukrainian armed forces, because the weather has already deteriorated significantly, so Ukrainian army is unable to evacuate with heavy armored vehicles using just fields. So for evacuation, this road is crucial. But here again, the Russian army is very close, but there is the smaller road goes in this area. So Russia wants to avoid the battle for all of those villages, and they are now concentrated to advance towards Uspennivka to cut Ukrainian supplies and potentially to encircle Ukrainian armed forces in all of those villages. It means that in the nearby future, Ukraine will be forced to withdraw the forces. I'm always concerned about those kind of the pockets because recently Russia created many of those, and you know there were the stories before that Ukrainian soldiers didn't receive the signals or orders to evacuate until the very last moment, or sometimes they didn't receive the order at all. So the local commanders in the area just made their own decisions to evacuate, saving their soldiers. About the terrain, well, as you can see, it's more or less flat, just the river goes in a small valley. Or should I call it a canyon? In Kurakhove direction, everything is more or less stable. Russia attacks the settlement again and again all the day. They've took control over the private residential area, but the main city is located on the uphill just a little, but still Ukrainian army has some certain advantage. The good thing here that Russia is unable to send the reinforcements using 2 of those dams. But the bad thing that if you see over here, Russia took control over this territory. They went to Dalna village and they may try to attack Kurakhove from 2 of the directions. So yes, again 2 of the directions, one from the east and the other one from the south. Already we see that they're in parallel with the central part of the settlement. Plus, they may also cut the supply road for Ukrainian armed forces. So Kurakhove, judging on this picture, I think will not last for a very long time. In the northern part, there is one more pocket for Ukrainian army created by Russia, and Russia continued to push again from 2 of the directions at least. But Ukraine has some of the defense line in the settlement, but Russia took the higher ground. And still there is the last variant, there is the road goes all across the shore of this lake, so Ukraine has the possibility to leave this settlement in case of the Russian rapid advancement from this direction. And let's check out the update from the deep state military map source. So it was yesterday and it is today. As you can see, definitely many of the areas which Russia took confirmed. So this area is the major hotspot from all of the front lines. Russia also tries to go to Kupiansk. They have the order to get Kupiansk this year, and they went towards the settlement, towards the city inside it. I've told you about this case the day before yesterday. So yes, I'm quite concerned about the Kharkiv region as well. The confirmation of the recent Russian success also comes from many of the experts. For example, Mykos Center 3 puts attention that Ukraine lost many of the vehicles, tanks, armored vehicles, and Russians also penetrated the Ukrainian defense lines. Those lines are made with no engineering equipment mostly. They've been created by Ukrainian soldiers themselves. Unlike the Russian defense lines on the south, for example, where Russia hired a special engineering company to build those. Yeah, it was the big money laundering as well, but they built those defense lines. Ukraine didn't make it happen. So actually it's not the big obstacle for the Russian army in their advancement. Unfortunately, guys, but we have what we have. In the tourist direction, some of the experts say that Ukraine may strike towards south. So Russia may assault from the east and Ukraine will go southbound, but for now it is not happening. The Russian Z blogger Sertins, who was arrested in the Russian Federation and was accused of spreading the fakes against the Russian army, is now being sent to fight in the special military operation, so basically in Ukraine, where I guess he will be zeroed by the Russian army itself, because Sertins was in opposition towards the current Russian government. Or it's better to say towards the current Russian military command. He criticized many of the decisions. That's the real case why he was arrested. His name is Igor, and even before, many years ago, he used to fight against the Ukrainian army in the east. He is the open Russian Nazi and he is against Ukraine. So I predict that he will be no more very soon. My friends, and now please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are. Have a great time.